And I want to thank everybody for getting here sort of in a rush. We're going to have to go vote a little after 3, but we wanted to get as much done as possible because I think there's like 6 votes and there may not be a resumption of the hearing. So we're going to be efficient and get to it and have a good discussion. Today we're going to look at the federal government's role in funding research. I'm concerned that the government system of supporting research is inefficient and often incentivizes the wrong things, which leads to bad science and wasted taxpayer dollars. We've published examples like this National Science Foundation study, which was had money being spent on Ugandan gambling habits. I just see no reason at all taxpayer money would go to that, period. I just don't know, and we do it year after year after year. Senator Langford found an NIH study, $2 million, investigating if kids don't like food that has been sneezed on. Are you more or less likely to eat the food in front of you in the buffet line if someone sneezes on it? That's absurd. And who would forget the shrimp on a treadmill found by Senator Coburn? So how does this happen? More accurately, how does this continue to happen? I remember as a kid in the 1970s seeing Senator William Proxmire describe waste such as this as he gave his Golden Fleece Awards, and here we are 40 years later, still with the same kind of questions. Part of the problem is the old adage, publish or perish. Researchers that publish are more likely to get federal funding, and unique research is more publishable. So how do unique projects get funded to begin with? At some agencies, grant applicants themselves can actually recommend who should review and make the recommendations on their grant. So the people getting the money can recommend who approves giving them the money. That's right, researchers get to pick the people who approve their funding. Doesn't sound very objective. Some grantsmanship books advise applicants to recommend reviewers who will be champions for your work, while agency guidelines suggest disqualifying those who have scientific disagreement with you. So we teach people how to get grants and we say, find people who agree with you and get them on the committee. If you know anyone already disagrees with you, make sure you keep them off the committee. This is baking in bias and it's unacceptable. So I've introduced legislation that will prohibit this practice and further require impartiality on grant review panels. Another problem we have found is downstream funding or taking original grant money and giving it to other researchers for projects that are often not consistent with the original grant. The federal government gives someone money to do research. That person then gives it to someone else who even may give it to a third or a fourth party. None of this is published in public government databases. One example of this problem was a study that its intent was to what makes for the perfect first date. Now, to me, the problem is the original study to begin with, not the fact that we're subcontracting, but this is the title of the study, What Makes for Perfect First Date? The original grant to study how scientists collaborate on scientific research. So they were going to study collaboration on scientific research. They somehow got to what makes for a perfect first date. It's difficult to discover how much of these studies cost because they're cobbled together from multiple subgrants. So my bill would curtail this by requiring that all subgrants, no matter how removed from the original grant, be fully reported, approved, and made public. We also found that many grants are issued for rational but broad research subjects and then are used for ridiculous ancillary projects. For example, one researcher took money from NIH to study drug and alcohol abuse and then published a paper on how to select the best wines for your palate. I'm not sure how this prevents alcoholism, but I'm pretty sure it must have been interesting to the journal editors. So our bill creates a special inspector general to oversee this and make sure that we're spending our money wisely. Why should we do this? Well, we spend $700 billion more than we take in every year, and we have a $20 trillion debt. It is inexcusable just to keep shoveling good money after bad without paying attention to how we spend it. We've also have asked in our bill for something called a taxpayer advocate for research that can look into these matters, provide rigorous oversight, and report to Congress about such follies. Our bill also requires that committees reviewing grants have at least one researcher from a scientific field unrelated to the subject area to further remove personal bias. The idea is to have a scientist from important areas of research, such as cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, sit in on review committees that would review grants for wine tasting. Maybe someone would say, you know what, we really have a lot of people with Alzheimer's, or we really have a lot of people with heart disease, maybe someone would say, maybe the shrimp on a treadmill is not something we have to study, or maybe the money could be better spent somewhere else. The last problem I'll discuss is replicability. An increasing body of work shows that in an effort to publish, a lot of research is not reproducible. This means that the study cannot be duplicated by other scientists to produce statistically similar results. That's a major problem, and it goes back to this issue of publishing. Journal readers and editors don't get excited about negative results, so the bias is towards funding studies that prove a premise versus studies that may disprove a premise. My bill would seek to address this by creating greater transparency through the whole process so taxpayers can know exactly how their money is being used. This will allow the scientific community and the public at large to be able to collectively review and evaluate taxpayer-funded research. Hopefully, this will deter study manipulation to prove hypothesis. Some will say that the general public doesn't understand science, but I don't think you need a PhD to understand people are less likely to choose food that has been sneezed on, and they don't want that kind of research either. With that, I'd like to recognize our ranking member, Senator Peters, for his opening statement.